And welcome back to the LawNewz Network, everybody. I'm Aaron Keller, and I want to bring Cathy Russon from Court Chatter into the discussion now because she's been watching this case very, very closely, as we all know. Cathy, we've been listening to testimony from that manager at Tootsie's who was on earlier, and I thought it was really, really, really interesting and dangerous from a legal perspective for the defense to allow that witness to go into character evidence, or at least what sounded a lot like character evidence, because the minute the defense does that, the prosecution can bring witnesses on to rebut it. So if the prosecution has got somebody on tap who can say Aaron Hernandez is an evil guy, he's violent, he was unduly rough for a football player, he punched out an opposing teammate, whatever may have happened at any point in this guy's past, then the state can bring that in. Were you sensing the same thing when you watched that? Cathy, we can't hear you. I think that there's probably a mute button that we need to. There we go. Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, I sort of chuckled to myself that the strip club manager would be talking about his character, but that he did talk about how he was always very nice and polite with people. But Alexander Bradley did talk about his character and how so that was already kind of brought in. It doesn't sound like the state is going to put on much of a rebuttal case, if anything, from what Judge Locke said today. So I don't know if they plan on bringing in some character witnesses to rebut that.
Yeah, but from a pure evidence law standpoint, I mean, I was sitting here, and the minute I started to hear this, I got this weird scowl on my face. And our guest, attorney Norman Williams, he started to get a scowl on his face, and he said, "Are they going there?" And then I said, "I don't know, are they going there?" And then they went there, at least from our perspective, and we were both sitting here shaking our heads saying that is just dangerous, because it's always possible that the state could bring somebody on to try to say that the defendant is violent. Whenever the defendant in most states and under the federal rules of evidence, some states have this a little bit different, but in Massachusetts and under the federal rules, the minute character evidence comes in, the state can do something to rebut it. So it's always a dangerous tactic.
Well, and that's true. And so why did they lead with that? See, we knew, or at least assumed, that this manager was coming on because we heard previous questions, or at least alluding to the fact that you were given back your phone, you didn't get back your phone, or through another source it was, didn't the manager say that the phone was given back to Bradley that night? So I had been waiting for the Tootsie's manager to come on about the phone. So when they asked him about how his character was, or how he responded to people in the club, I thought, really? This is the guy you're putting on for his character? I don't know. That seems dangerous to me. I don't know. I don't know what the Commonwealth is going to do with that.
Well, that's the whole thing. We don't know. They might be able to put evidence of poor character in the past. They might not, but it's the defense's job usually to make sure that they don't go there, because the minute they go there, it can be rebutted. So, of course, if you don't want it rebutted as a defense attorney, you just don't go there. So
right.
That was interesting. So anyway, let's talk about the significance of this phone, because I wasn't necessarily picking up on the phone as an extremely significant point. Is there something in there that I had missed along the way?
Yes, because Bradley's story about leaving Tootsie's that night, that he had left his phone at Tootsie's. This is the night he was allegedly shot by Hernandez.
Mm-hmm.
And that they had left Tootsie's, and he left his phone inside the club, and he told the driver that, well, I guess the driver we now know as Pierre, that he needed to go back to get his phone. And Hernandez said, no, we're not going back. And a fight ensued between him and Hernandez about going back for Bradley's phone. And he said, I want to go back for my phone. And Hernandez like, no, we're not going back for your phone. I'll just buy you a phone. And so there was a big deal made about that between when Baez was crossing him, because I guess it goes to the credibility of Bradley, because now he's saying he didn't have a phone, but yet he was able to make a phone call after he was shot. They keep bringing up, oh, you were texting with your cousin after you were shot, that you did have a phone, but it was a burner phone and I left it back in Connecticut. It's all about whether he left this phone or didn't left this phone. Now, that in itself really isn't, did Aaron Hernandez shoot you that night? But I think it's more of Alexander Bradley just telling more lies. What really did happen that night, or was it even that night? And was it even Aaron Hernandez that was with him that night he was shot? And the manager now is saying that a party that was with Aaron Hernandez that night did leave his phone, and it was given back to him that night. So that's why they brought him on to rebut what Alexander Bradley testified to.
So at the end of the day, is just a credibility issue of Bradley's perhaps, and again, I suppose that in the long run, any credibility issue would stack upon the other mountains of credibility issues that we've seen with Bradley in this case. So it's just another brick to toss onto the wall that they're building against Bradley, I guess.
Yeah, he's insisting that he left his phone there, and then a fight ensued between the two of them about that.
Okay, interesting. And, we've had all this discussion before about whether or not Bradley has one phone or two phones, or how many phones he has and where the phones were, where they were left. One's in Connecticut, one's at Tootsie's. Hernandez is saying he might buy another phone. At this point, I think we might have to open up a GoFundMe just to make sure that he has phones, because it's a lot to wade through, at least from my perspective, and I'm sure from yours, and I'm sure from the jury's.
Well, yes, there's a lot in this case, regardless, for the jury to wade through, and a lot of disjoint. I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot, I should just say, for the jury to make out of all of this testimony that's been put up so far.
I want to talk about this issue that we started on a little bit last week, because it initially was a point in the trial for a joke, a laugh, where the Commonwealth asked the fiance, Aaron Hernandez's fiance, about this man cave, and she testified finding a gun in the drawer, and then she testified to going downstairs to this man cave, and gave Aaron Hernandez a dirty look, and any man in a relationship with any woman pretty much knows what that look is, and it's different for everyone. But there's an interesting sidebar to this beyond just the finding of the gun and the look, and then the Commonwealth got into a question about, well, what does he do down in his man cave? And the judge jumped in and said, man cave stuff. And everybody laughed a little bit, and then the Commonwealth just sort of went on with its case. But we were talking a little bit about what's up with this man cave stuff just being glossed over, because in the previous trial we found out that that's where Aaron Hernandez would go and smoke pot. And there may have also been something in the first trial about weapons being in the man cave. Am I remembering that properly, or am I not?
Well, yeah, you and I talked a little bit off air the other day where I said that I thought Judge Locke maybe either shouldn't have interjected at that point, or I was surprised that he did, and I was surprised that the Commonwealth didn't try and continue. I thought they were trying to go somewhere with the man cave questions, and Judge Locke just interjected a joke. You actually thought Judge Locke could have done it on purpose because he didn't want to get into anything to do with the Olden Lloyd case, and that could be it. We did learn during the Olden Lloyd that down there in the basement is where Aaron Hernandez hung out with his homies and with Wallace and his people, and they did smoke a lot of pot down there. And then there were guns down there that were brought out when they searched the place. So it's interesting that the Commonwealth were asking specific questions about that man cave, and he specifically asked her, and what things did he do down that man cave? And Judge Locke just interrupted it with a joke.
Yeah, I was wondering if perhaps it was an attempt, and of course I can't read the judge's mind, and I don't know why he interjected this little piece of levity into the middle of the case, but I was wondering if perhaps the reason the judge jumped in is because he was anticipating an objection and then a lengthy argument and potentially a mistrial argument out of the defense for having that kind of information come in this case, because it goes to uncharged conduct and it goes to whether or not evidence from the previous case should come into this case. And rather than just sit and hash through that whole thing, maybe the judge just cracked the joke as a signal for the Commonwealth to move on. That was a possible guess. I haven't played out all the potential evidence ramifications of it. Maybe the judge was looking at the defense and knew they were going to jump up, and the judge just butted in before they could. But I don't know. I mean, if I were the judge, would I have done it? Probably not, because I would let the attorneys make their own objections and handle the evidence as they see fit.
Yeah, when you brought that up, I actually hadn't even thought of that. I thought that the judge, that was inappropriate for the judge to do that, because the Commonwealth was going somewhere. And in the end, you and I just might be reading way too much into this, and maybe nobody was going anywhere. I don't know. And like you said, that's a good point about the judge may have read something into the defense getting ready to object. We're not inside the courtroom, so we're not seeing everything that's going on in there. And yeah, maybe we're going way too far. Maybe the Commonwealth wasn't going anywhere with their question. What did he do down? What kind of things were going on in the man cave? But I did pick up on that because that was talked about in the old Lloyd murder.
Yeah, that was an interesting piece in this case from my perspective. So we had a considerable amount of fun trying to bat around the possibilities there. So. Where do things go from here? We know that we're not going to hear testimony tomorrow. We know that we're going to hear discussions about the charges for the jury and the jury instructions. So we'll have that to listen in on tomorrow. But you think there's only going to be 3 more witnesses in this case?
That's what they said. They said, Baez said that he has 3 witnesses that could not, because of scheduling conflicts, be here tomorrow. That he has 3 witnesses on Wednesday. He said that before lunch time today, that he has 3 witnesses Wednesday, and then we know Judge Locke said that this case is wrapping up on Wednesday. So that's how I concluded there's only 3 witnesses left for the defense. And I think we all know that at least one is Dr. Jamie Downs, a forensic pathologist for the defense. I'm not clear exactly on who the other 2 are going to be.
It'll be interesting because the original list, I think, had 281 people on it. So we went from 281 to 8 witnesses or something like that. And so it'll be interesting because we also had heard at one point in this case that the defense was planning to call a week's worth of testimony. And it looks like that's going to shrink down to what, half a week, 4 days when you add it all up, something like that?
Really not even that. Look, we had, we're going to have not even a full day today, and 3 witnesses on Wednesday. So what does that give you? Their case is hardly anything.
Yeah.
But now, in fairness, when I say 281, their witness list was labeled potential witnesses, and all they said was anyone that could have been mentioned in the trial. And a lot of their witnesses actually were already called by, not a lot, but some were actually already called by the state. So I had been marking down which ones, and they did cross-examination on them, which is part of their case, is cross-examination.
Certainly. The cross-examinations in this case have been phenomenally interesting and in many cases very well done. So, I mean, the bottom line is that in theory, the defense probably could just make its case with its cross-examination of Alexander Bradley and then a couple of the other minor witnesses, because almost every police officer, detective, Commonwealth witness involved in the investigation was needled over either a discrepancy in the type of evidence gathered or a discrepancy in procedure, or in the case of the medical examiner, an error in measurement which wasn't corrected on paperwork. And so we had just point after point after point where the official investigation was messy in some way, and I thought that the messiness went above what we usually see in messiness of investigative techniques by the police. And then we had that lengthy cross-examination of Alexander Bradley, rather. So again, an interesting set of cross-examinations here that in theory made the defense case in chief a lot more fluid and a lot more easy, if I can say that, than perhaps we first thought it would be.
Well, we see a lot of trials where the defense doesn't call any witnesses, and they'll just stand up and say, we have no witnesses. Now, in 99% of those cases, the defendant's convicted. Mm-hmm. So, I can't say that that's effective, but we see that, and they rest saying, that they put on their case. They don't say this, but their cross-examination was their case, and the state has not proven their charges, and that's what we see. In this case, you're right. I have said all along, and many have said that the Commonwealth doesn't have necessarily a strong case. I don't say that this isn't winnable for the Commonwealth, but this isn't the slam dunk cases that we tend to see a lot of. So they could have rested without putting on witnesses, and the street sweeper didn't get them anywhere, in my opinion, and I don't know that what they put on so far has really gotten them. I don't know that they needed these witnesses today.
Well, let me ask a very vague question here, but I think it cuts a little bit closer to the bone as to why this case has been interesting. You said that this case doesn't have the slam dunk win that we see in some of the other cases that we cover here at LawNewz and that I'm used to watching as a journalist. What has been the draw for this case? Why has this one been so interesting, wiping off the table the fact that the defendant's an NFL player?
Well, that's a big one to wipe off, right?
Well, certainly. Let's remove that from the discussion.
If you want, strictly from a trial watcher perspective, which is my specialty, and that's my background, and that's what I do. This is the chat rooms, and this is the social media aspect of it. Aaron Hernandez has already been tried once, and that trial was live streamed, and people watched that. So that is what makes this case interesting. Now, the big elephant in the room is Jose Baez. And because he tried a high-profile case of Casey Anthony, mm-hmm. he's the big draw to this case and the big interesting factor to this case. And every trial watcher loves to hate Jose Baez, or 99%, I shouldn't say every. And he brings a big draw to this case. And I think a lot of people went into this case thinking, he's a convicted murderer, and I don't even know why they're bothering to try this case, and it's a slam dunk. And then it was a little bit of, this might be more interesting than what I thought it was. There could be some reasonable doubt here. And so now the ears are perked up a little bit during this trial to pay closer attention to the evidence. And people that really love our justice system and love to watch these cases like that kind of a case. They like to get into it and really see what the evidence is. So there's a lot of different factors, from the players to the defendant to the actual evidence in this case.
I can certainly understand that. From our perspective here, the testimony is often bumpy and disjunctive, and the details are the devil in this case. How many cell phones did Alexander Bradley have? Where were they left? Was one in Connecticut? Was one left at the club? Did he have another one on top of that? But when you start to add it all up, and it takes a while to draw all the links in this case, but when you start to add it all up, it's just a difficult set of witnesses. It's a difficult set of testimony, and there are a lot of loose ends here.
Oh, there is. Hey, I love this case. I hate to say I love this case because there are victims here, and their family is in this courtroom, and actually that's a heartbreaking part of this case. And I have taken some screenshots and tweeted out the family members. And they've had to leave during parts of this case. And I know that that's often forgotten in these cases, are the victims that lost their lives. And that's why I hate to say I love this case. And a lot of people will say, the circus that surrounds these cases, things like that. But from just strictly from from the law perspective, from what I love to just get into a meat of a case, and to just everything from the people that are getting on the stand to the faulty memories to just everything about this case for me is just this is what I love to see happen in a courtroom, to watch both sides of our justice system work, to watch the prosecutors in action and the defense attorneys in action defending their client, and the judge trying to keep it all together. That's why I think this case is fascinating.
Well said. Cathy Russon from Court Chatter, we appreciate you joining us, certainly, and we always appreciate your perspective, your viewpoint from the mountaintop of those who watch these trials almost professionally, and in your case, professionally.
Thank you, Aaron.
All right, take care. Well, we're going to do this now. Let's go back in and play some of the testimony that we heard earlier from the fiance of Aaron Hernandez. We have some lengthy clips put together of the most critical elements of her testimony, because it was interesting to see what she remembered and what she didn't remember. Let's listen in.